So, and this is World War II on steroids, because now you have cyberspace, now you have satellites, now you have, drone capabilities. When I joined the army, it was, we didn't even have telephones. So, it's come on leaps and bounds in the drone technology in the 6 years I've been in Ukraine. So, it's a whole different war. It's not just about good and bad. That is an element of it. But, we've never fought in a war like this since World War II. It's got more in common with the Ardennes forest, in Europe than it has in Belgium, than it has than any other conflict.
3, 2, 1. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Tactical Operations Center in Ukraine. It is your host, Crusader. I want to thank all my friends, family, supporters, and veterans out there. I salute you. Guys, remember, help the channel grow by subscribing, and also you guys know what to do with the like button. Take them out. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Shaun Pinner. He is the author of Live, Fight, Survive. This book is his first-hand account of surviving the initial Russian invasion, the Battle of Mariupol, and being captured and taken as a prisoner of war. Shaun would go on to stand in a kangaroo court preceded by the illegitimate state of the Donetsk People's Republic. He was sentenced to death, but later traded in a prisoner swap and now speaks out against the Russian criminal state. So without further ado, I'm going to allow Mr. Shaun Pinner to tell his story. And guys, please, out there, Live, Fight, Survive, one of the greatest books I've ever read. You can find it on Amazon. Highly suggest you give it a read. All right, Mr. Shaun Pinner, please take it away.
I fought in quite a few conflicts. I fought in Bosnia in the early 90s, the Northern Ireland, and counter-terrorism. I was working there for 3 years with Covert Operations Platoon and Londonderry and Belfast, and during those times I ended up going back to the second time to Bosnia, and that's a policing role really with the United Nations. A lot of the military now is about policing, and not really so much as being warm. We're still fighting in conflicts from green zones in safety areas in other sides of the world, but this conflict here is on our doorstep. It's a 360 war. We haven't seen anything like this since World War II. So, and this is World War II on steroids, because now you have cyberspace, now you have satellites, now you have, drone capabilities. When I joined the army, it was, we didn't even have telephones. So, it's come on leaps and bounds in the drone technology in the 6 years I've been in Ukraine. So, it's a whole different war. It's not just about good and bad. That is an element of it, but, we've never fought in a war like this since World War II. It's got more in common with the Ardennes forest, in Europe than it has in Belgium, than it has than any other conflict. Some of the longest trench lines in the world, and, so, it's a massive frontage here, and the Ukraine conflict, the good side and the bad side of it is that, Russia invaded. It was unprovoked. It is a good versus bad. Russia bombing children's cancer hospitals, and maternity wards. And so, it is a good versus bad. Russia, really, the West doesn't really understand what Russia's about, and Russia will do anything to win. It just, what's beneficial about likes of me and you as we live in Ukraine, and we can talk about that and actually put some truth behind it. Whereas for a long period of time, Russia's dominated that info space with the British propagandists who are, totally in line with the Kremlin and spouting their rubbish and the false narrative. So, and the false narratives should tell you everything about, the good, the bad in this war, because, it's Russia's initial, everybody's a Nazi in Ukraine. Gets people thinking that it's like Brandenburg in Mariupol,
Why do people think, why do people let some of this Kremlin propaganda sink into and basically infiltrate our society? How are we letting that happen?
Oh, no, that's a lot to unpack there, but to just really skim over the top of that, I think really... when I came in 2008 in Ukraine, I don't think many people really knew what Ukraine was about. Most people thought, it was Russia. And, and I probably didn't really know what I know now. And for a long period of time, you got likes of Graham Phillips who are just pumping out this false narrative with really no comeback from Ukraine on how to deal with that. They were totally pro-Kremlin. You know, Patrick Lancaster, another one. It's just, I mean, you can list them all. You know, Russell Bentley. You know, they were just pumping out this false narratives that we were all actually, you know, Nazis. And the reason I got my my Twitter account sort of set up was because I lived there. It just wasn't like that, you know. And when you spin it, fast forward a couple of years, we've now started to claw back that information war that they had a head start on. They were planning this war a year in advance before, you know, the invasion. We were blogging here, reporting on this, you know, 2 years, 3 years before the full-scale invasion. You know, they're invaded in 2014, not 2022. So, you know, this false narratives, really their propaganda was leading up to this invasion in 2022, and they were preparing the groundwork by, you know, pumping out these false narratives, which obviously now we're in a position to actually deal with.
Why do you think some of these people are like motivated to pump out these false narratives who come from like the UK, like Patrick Lancaster, for example? Like, are these people financially motivated, or
I don't want to get sued?
Is it ideological?
I can put my PC answer to that on that first question is that a lot of them are failed in their own countries, who have come to an area where they can get a foothold. And really, some of them are just paid assets, stupid assets. And they're people really that don't have any pedigree in journalism. You know, they're more influencers. You know, Jackson Hinkle, Graham Phillips. They're not journalists. They don't really understand about journalism. You know, Patrick Lancaster, another one. They're not journalists. They call themselves journalists, but they're not. They're influencers, and that's unfortunately the majority of the people that come and do stuff, propaganda for the Kremlin. But that's my PC answer. You know, the problem you've got now, or not my problem, but their problem, is that, okay, you know, before Russia declared the US an enemy, and Britain an enemy officially, what you had was really those guys coming over to Moscow and shouting out their line under the false pretenses of freedom of speech. But now it's not, because Russia's clearly invaded and going to war with Europe, and now really officially calling the US an enemy. It now makes them more spies, and you know, they're more likely to be arrested when they come back to the UK and to America, because of the fact they're actually working for a foreign government to undermine and work against the very country that they come from. So, you know, they cease to become journalists. They weren't journalists before, but they sort of marched on the free speech mantra. But now they're not.
Yeah, I had to bring them up because didn't they even get access to some of the POWs at that time to interview people?
You know yourself, they did. Roman Kozarev got hold of me, which is they use English-speaking accented, non-Russian accented media people to really resonate with the West and the US and the UK and try and gain support for what they're doing. I mean, Roman Kozarev was one in particular for me. And then obviously Aidan Haslin had Graham Phillips, and he's a Brit with a British accent. So, of course, they use these and push you out on propaganda, and you know, if the Ukrainians hadn't had Viktor Medvedchuk, I don't think I'd be sitting here talking to you, to be fair. I think they would have quite happily shot us, because you know, and I know, living in Ukraine, what, you know, DPR will do to people that have even worked or in Azov or Ukrainians. I mean, they're torturing them, you know, at the moment. You know, they're 2 years in and still no humanitarian aid groups are allowed access to the Ukrainian prisoners. So, and then I've written a whole book about the fact how they use torture. Now I teach it. I teach resistance training. So, well, the first thing is that you've got elements. I mean, I'll talk to you about the procedure of which they use, and then I'll use bits and stories in my own and some other people. So what you have is a set sort of system that they work with. Is when you're captured initially, you go through initialization phase, which is where all the bad stuff's going to happen. Generally, the first stage of capture is extremely hard, and really the problem, the choke point, that if you survive that initial capture, then things might look up. So the reason that's the case is because you're on the battlefield, you're in it, and it's the most dangerous time because of the unpredictability. So you've really got to sort of come up with some plans how to get through that first initial capture without getting killed. It was exceptionally hard and pretty 50-50, I would say, in Ukraine. So myself had a plan really to talk to shout to them that I was British, because my Russian is okay, my Ukrainian is very bad. My Russian's okay, but I still speak with a London accent. So I'm not going to get through that first part of tactical question in the filtration phase of is he of interest or is he not. I'm always going to be of interest. And then also what I was wearing was probably the better end of the spectrum as well. You know, most Ukrainians can't afford Garmin or ripstop Pixel or waterproof Pixel, you know, and buffalo fleeces and lower boots. You know, it's all issue for most of those guys. So I didn't realise quite quickly that all the gear, I looked like a walking catalogue of Gucci military stuff, which really they started to rob me when they first got me. Which is quite good because it's a bit of a distraction to actually beating me, and which came next. You know, I was handed to Russians, which after I was initially captured, they proceeded to stab me in the leg straight away to stop me from running away, which tells me they had training. And these guys were a totally different breed, Spetsnaz, probably FSB or police of some sort, military police of some sort, because they had all the good gear, and they were pretty much knew that if I was trained, that I would try to escape between A and B, because once you get to B, it's very hard to get out of that area because of you know, more guards and maybe walls and a prison. So to avoid that sort of problem of me trying to escape, they just literally stabbed me in the leg. So that was my opening sort of welcome to life as a prisoner of war, really. And then if you provide and you can get through that initial capture quite intact, your aim should be to really get through with, you know, minimal injury, because you don't know how the medical situation is going to be behind. And you know damn well that they're going to, if you're captured, you've seen, everybody knows if you've been to sort of in the military or was in the military, or you like military films and war films, if you're going to get captured, some of this sort of shit's going to happen. It's not going to be the Ritz-Carlton. You know, it's not going to be, you know, a top quality hotel stay, and, you know, you are going to get some, you know, battered. So you have to, I've done survival, escape, resist and evade training. So I'd actually done all that. So I was pretty clued up on sort of how to act and what to do, and you know, and how to conduct myself in that environment. But it's still 50-50 at those early days. But then once you get to, you know, I was also electrocuted quite badly using a field phone. And then that's all part of the initialization phase, the beatings, the tasers, the electrocution, the stabbing the leg, constant beating to a pulp. Because at some point, you know, you're going to get into the next phase, which is the good cop, which is the, you can rely upon me, I will stop these guys from beating you, tell us what you know. So generally that hadn't changed for 30 or 40 years. So that's where you start out into the system-induced pressures. And most of that, for the first couple of months, will be system-induced pressures, outside influences that really you can't do much about. And that ranges from propaganda to torture by way of no food. I had 60 days with just eating bread every now and again. I'd be pulled out for propaganda, and then maybe I could sort of exploit the situation to get a burger or something to keep it going. But by the time I'd got 2 months in, I was down to skeletal and bare bones, maybe weighing 60 kilos. You know, you saw the pictures. So, you know, that starvation is the worst form of torture. There's no medical. You don't get toothpaste, toothbrush. And when you're eating bread, you're talking about all the nutrients you're not getting. Some of those guys now have been in prison 2.5 years. So then some of them won't make it another third year because they're just being abused. And there are no humanitarian organisations that really check on the Ukrainian POWs because Russia's systemic torture policy. So you won't get any help in there. It's just about daily survival, and that's where you have to sort of keep motivation all going. But once I was then taken to court and then used propaganda, sham trials, sentenced to death. It didn't stop for a good three or 4 months. But then what you've got then is once you've sentenced someone to death, what do you do with them? Then you've got the mental side of it, the self-induced pressures, which can be far worse than physical sometimes, because if you don't manage that and you manage those, those dark thoughts that start to come in because you're in a cell 24 hours a day, there's no light, no wind, no rain, no window. When we only got a window when we moved to another prison. So, it's a 1 metre, 3 metre cell in a black site somewhere underground. You just don't get out. So, you do get those dark thoughts, but you need to control those. And that's when the self-induced pressures can take you down the wrong road if you're not careful. And it's about managing that. For me, it was about, I'd had training, I understood what I needed to do. I had an infatuation, really, with trying to work out info, information, just used my ears most of the time, and trying to listen to what was going on so I could draw my own conclusions to whether I was going to live or not. So, it depends how you are. If you've got good character, you generally, if you've got a good glass half full and you're quite mature, you'll probably do better than someone who's 19-year-old who doesn't want to be there, who this is their first operation. For me, I was 50 years old, better understanding the people, trained in SEER and resistance training. So I couldn't tell anybody about that, but really I had a better understanding than most what was happening. So it is about, character. It's about, but it's about exploiting those situations to get food. You see those guys that are surviving and been coming back now, they're just emaciated like Japanese war camp survivors, and nobody's saying anything because they don't want to really upset the prisoner exchange that's actually going on at the moment. So not much is being said, and a lot of humanitarian aid groups largely remain quiet about it. So you won't see a lot of people kicking up a fuss, but they're clearly being mistreated, and Ukrainians have independent humanitarian aid groups that check on the Russians, which is why they go back looking at a totally different condition as the prisoners that are coming in from Russia.
Some people might even say, Ukraine's kind of like fighting this war with one hand behind their back. Like they're limited to what they can do because they, have like an image to portray for NATO and Western allies. Do you think that's fair?
Well, the Ukraine has we've been fighting this war for 2 years with one hand behind their
Well, just when it comes to like the disadvantages, like U.S. says, oh, you guys can't use missiles that go into Russian territory, or like even.
Well, you can go back as that summer offensive last year. To be fair, I mean, no NATO country would have sent any of NATO member into an offensive like that the way they expected Ukraine to go into it and put pressure on them, and then said, why didn't it happen? I mean, it was just a debacle. Half the kit didn't come in. They were pushing and pushing Ukraine to make the offensive, and really we had no air support. We just spent the last year with no artillery shells, with horror stories on the front line, and all the problems we got now are the fact that we had no artillery shells, and some of the sites had just smoke. They were using FPV drones to fill in the gaps, and some of the stories here, the front lines, I still don't know how the lines held. So, it was just, we've made this our own making. That worst statement ever, that Biden made about for as long as it takes. As long as it takes till the next election. It's just such an open-ended statement, and really only this year has that Europe and the UN, Europe and NATO, I've only really just got started to up the rhetoric, get involved and supply all the gear that it should have been supplying 1 year ago. or to start an invasion. So, it's been an absolute debacle from Europe, from everyone, from the States, not just them, but just within Europe too. Now we're starting to get the shells coming in. Now we're starting to have some successes. And nobody really talks about Ukrainian successes. All they talk about is the failures. Don't really talk about the fact that Ukraine's fought back and got over 50% of the land that initially lost during the invasion. Doesn't talk about over 30% of the Black Sea fleet's been sunk. And now scarpered and fled from Crimea. Doesn't talk about the air defence units that are now telling their families to move out of Crimea because they can't guarantee their safety. The media doesn't report very much on Ukraine's successes in regaining and winning the Battle of the Black Sea. It just talks about, the negative side of Ukraine the majority of the time, which you just end up just getting a bit annoyed with that. And you have to put things in even keels and that drives you on social media to actually tell you what's really happening out here, So, and you have to question why that is. It's because Russia there is no free press in Russia.
Yeah, it seems like Russia has an advantage here. They just go straight for it.
No, that's it. There's no free press in Russia, and there's no independence. It's all state controlled. RT, the guys sending in Roman Kazarov to interview me, and I didn't get a choice in that. Where was my free speech? So, RT are complicit in the torture of Ukrainian prisoners as well. And the guys that do it. Graham Phillips will go back to the UK and be arrested probably because he's broken the Geneva Conventions on treatment of prisoners of war, which we're a signatory of. So he will go back. He won't go back to the UK. He's now fighting sanctions. He's one of the fighting sanctions because of what's happened. So, they're not journalists. They're propaganda, provocateurs. They're not doing balanced journalism with ethics. They don't have any ethics. They're clearly rooting for the Kremlin. That puts them as in the sprites. If they're getting paid for it, mercenary bracket, spy bracket. So, if that's the case, so the media's not really reflective, and they still have a presence in the British media on Twitter and Rumble and places like that. So you're still getting the Russian message across through those guys.
What I don't understand is, why don't we have any laws to essentially consider all media outforms in Russia belong to an enemy state, and we could essentially make all these platforms, not accessible in the Western hemisphere, kind of like what we did during the Second World War with sanctions on, German newspapers or Japanese radio, things like that, this nature. You said it's basically an all-out hybrid warfare coming from the Russian side. It just seems like we're a bit slow to react in some way.
We are slow. I mean, it's terribly slow. The Russian, don't get me wrong, the Russians have been very clever at just really playing below the bar of declaring war, which then you probably would get that. So while not officially declaring out and out war, they're just they're stepping very close to the line. But they are attacking in every medium possible.
Do you think that they will go to the line? Do you think there's a chance of a direct confrontation between NATO and Russia?
I don't think yet, but I think in the future it will if it doesn't start slowing down. You can see the joint exercises now between China, India and Russia. Mm-hmm. This is not ICC wanted war criminal.
China was doing war games in Belarus. Yeah, just a week ago.
This is all about people wanting to hold on to power. This isn't about democracy or anything like that. This is about, like you said earlier on, the bad versus the good. The democracy, people's choice against autocratic governments. Gangster. I mean, Russia's a gangster state. I've gone through the legal system there. I mean, they bend the rules. I was jailed as a POW initially, and then it changed to then I was made a hostage for the exchange for Viktor Medvedchuk. They used the word mercenary. I was tried as a Nazi mercenary terrorist where I got the death penalty. And when you break that down, they don't just murder people in Ukraine. They murder the English language. I'm not a mercenary. I had legal status in Ukraine. I didn't actually leave the country that they invaded. Yeah, how can I be a mercenary when I'm working for the democratically elected government of the country I never left? You know, I don't even fit the definition of mercenary. So Russia will do everything to change and jail and kill anybody that doesn't fit the Kremlin mantra. So now it's going to the LGBTQ community, it's banned them as an extremist group, it's jailing every newspaper and journalist that isn't state controlled. Moscow Times this week is now outlawed, you know, so, and anybody that works with them can go to prison. You've got people that are just anti-war protesters in Russia that are doing 12 years just for changing price tags on shops with anti-war slogans. So really, I'm baffled at why anybody would want to support Russia. And now with the attacks, the direct targeting of children's cancer hospitals, if you didn't find the maternity ward and the theatre and the hospitals in Mariupol, and the 25,000 people, predominantly Russian-speaking Ukrainians, that were slaughtered by Putin in Mariupol, including women and children, if you didn't find that distasteful, you know, he's now attacking cancer hospitals in Kiev. Where is the outcry? Where's the reports? Where's the UN in this? They were chairing the UN when they attacked the hospital. So, you know, there's a lot of Russian corruption going on everywhere.
Blatant terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism.
You know, it was state-sponsored everywhere, from editors of newspapers that are getting paid not to print the story. That's a new one. To politicians like J.D. Vance, who's now mimicking the Kremlin propaganda. So, and then when you dig deeper, you realise that he's got business interests with Rumble that are running out of Russia. And he's actually given them the platform to spill the Russian propaganda. So you've got now Russia in American politics, and you know they're playing onto the fact that not everybody is tuned up to Europe and the world. So, you know, what's the percentage of Americans that don't even have a passport and never get out of America? It's quite high, isn't it? About 80%, something like that.
It's almost everyone.
Yeah, so they're just playing on that. So your average Republican Trumpite from the Bible Belt doesn't really know that his actual country is now being hijacked by Russia. So, you know, we're at that situation, and that's been 3 or 4 years in the making.
I see it, and it's frustrating as Americans.
Where we have to fight that back because we're at a point where we're starting to get some, the information war turning, and you know yourself in Ukraine, the wind of change is happening. But November is looming over everybody because they think that if Trump gets in, you know, all the funding will stop. So, you know, it's we actually make a good I feel that people feel the wind is changing in Ukraine into their favour. But, you know, we have no idea how long that's going to last, probably till November, until Trump probably wins the election.
I mean, is Ukraine capable of, producing everything it needs? Like, do they need outsourced help?
Well, we're very close to producing our own rockets and our own artillery shells. We will, as Europe and NATO, we will soon be out producing Russia in artillery shells, with 3 new sites opening up in Scandinavia and the Czech initiative, and which will mean hopefully we will have enough in place by November to Trump-proof Ukraine and support Ukraine should the worst happen. Because it is Russia is the size of Italy in its economy size. So what you've got is a very bad representation by some people to compare United States with Russia. It swamps it. You know, it's not even close. So, you know, Europe should be well capable enough to be able to support Ukraine, with then hopefully America looking on to as backup towards China and what's going on out there. So I personally see a future where Ukraine, the longer it goes on, the more detrimental it's going to be for Russia. And you're going to see more areas like the financial war that's going on. I think you're going to see more develop there than you will actually see on the battlefield, to be fair.
I mean, is there any room for negotiations? Or
I don't think we're at a point where we can negotiate yet. I mean, both sides have sort of said they're ready for it. I mean, Putin's been going it the last couple of months, 3 or 4 times a month going, we can talk about negotiations, but there's no point where it could start because, Ukraine has been absolutely adamant that this is not going to be at the detriment of territory in Ukraine. So, yeah, both sides want to talk, but you're not even close to a position where they can talk. All that stuff you see in the social media, it's just propaganda. You've got Russian sites saying, Zelenskyy now wants to talk. That's not what he said at all. So you've got an absolute propaganda war, which is being pumped out by the Kremlin bots. I mean, I get hit by bots all the time. They're now attacking my Amazon, and my book, and saying it's shit, and non-verified purchases going up. I have to fight that now. I mean, they're so everywhere in every walk of life.
It's like they got their tentacles everywhere.
They're everywhere, yeah, absolutely everywhere. So personally, I think what you get is if you get another Ukrainian offensive, it's going to be a totally different offensive than last time, because we've got F-16s coming in. We'll outproduce Russia on the artillery front, and if we're able to hit those the other side of the border into Russia and hit those airfields, then it's going to be a whole different offensive, which is long overdue, to be fair. But you won't see much development on the battlefield this year. I think Russia's pretty much exhausted now. It's offering new financial packages in Moscow, and incentives now have been increased to try and avoid calling a national mobilization in Russia. Now Russia's experiencing 40% inflation on basic goods. It's running a 4 trillion ruble budget deficit. So you've really got Russia's having a real problem with 40% of its GDPs currently being spent on nothing for 2 years. So really, Russia's in a very bad way. And now they're saying that they've exhausted all the money. So we're reading reports on that quite a lot. And talking to people on the occupied territories and in Russia, when you start getting 40% inflation and potentially hyperinflation on basic goods, for a country where your average wage is anywhere between $800 and $1,200 per month, that's going to have a massive effect on the people, in Russia. So you're probably likely to see a real problem there in the future. And also, the Kremlin is now drawing in all national figures and statistics to the Kremlin as a matter of national security, which should tell you everything. That everything that comes out of Kremlin is going to be a lie in the future. So I think you're more likely to see that. The aircraft industry's crashed in the States. They're not keeping up their war industries at maxed out. So providing Ukraine keeps getting the support as the level it's getting at now as a minimum level, I think then there's no reason. If you take Crimea, then you can take Mariupol in the east, and they know that. Russia know that. So this is why they're pushing for a ceasefire, because they're exhausted.
Hey, Shaun, I want to just ask you a question. Go and hand yourself off to. Was it like an order?
April the 11th, 12th, we got told that we're going to make that Zelenskyy had said that we're going to try and escape. And some people like Aidan, as you know, were in the centre of Illich's steelworks, very difficult to get out. But it was your own personal choice. And those steelworks are huge. Me, I was at the edge of it on the outskirts, so it was pretty easy for me. And I was a Brit, I wasn't going to get captured. I'd done SEER training, and my commander wanted to try and make a break for it. But it was, you could either negotiate your surrender or try and get out to friendly lines. We opted for the latter, and I was captured about 2 hours outside Mariupol. I'd prepared for an escape and evasion, stripped down kit, took what I needed, and unfortunately couldn't get through the first line of Russians that were encircled Mariupol, about 200 kilometres deep at that point. So we were going to have to escape and evade for a long period of time, which was probably going to take about 10 to 15 days because the drones were flying around like Heathrow Airport. You can't really walk through the days and the nights. You have to walk through 3 hours in the morning, dusk, and 3 hours in the evening, dawn. And you really have to stop walking at night because of the mine threat with Stashka and everything like that. And so tripwires and things. So you really sort of limited at times you could go. And then really I stumbled into what was a Donetsk People's Republic forward operating position. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but when I walked into the position, they fired a shot, just missed me. I ducked down, but I was able to then get rid of my phone and all the intelligence. I'd already prepared for most of it. Because what people don't realise, if you get caught with bank cards, the Russians will capture you, then march you to an ATM and try and draw money out. And then once you draw the money out, probably shoot you. So it's all that intelligence stuff, wife's business card and things like that you have to get rid of before you go on an escaping invasion, you know. But I was able to drop my phone into a runoff pond, where it'd been raining heavily. So there was a 3-foot lake at the bottom of the hill. I managed to sort of throw my phone in that and get rid of that because they were in close proximity. And then really sort of evaluate microseconds, evaluate the situation. If I made a break for it, it was in broad daylight, one of the best days we'd had in Donetsk Oblast that year. So it's clear blue skies and sun. They would probably mowed me down. So I'd already cast a plan that I'd speak English and say I'm English, hopefully get them on the back foot a bit, and then realise I got some value. I wanted to surrender to a Russian officer because I didn't want to get caught by the DPR, Donetsk People's Republic, but that obviously didn't work out because I was captured by the DPR. And then really just had to make a decision at that time where I was going to run or go. And they were in about 25, 30 metres away from me and had to higher ground. So if I'd have turned around and run, I'd probably been cut down. So I certainly don't regret the decision of being captured and making that decision to then become a prisoner of war, which is really hard because then you have to stand up and trust those guys in front of you at one of the most unpredictable points, wherever they're going to shoot you as you walk in. So at the 30-metre death walk, I called it, and walked straight towards the position, and then hopefully they didn't shoot me, which they didn't, and then I got a chance to explain who I was and what I was doing in my sort of Rusglish and best possible sort of submissive tone, you know. But I was pretty angry when I got captured. I won't kid you. I'd gone through 7 weeks of fighting where I could die every day, so I don't ever remember being scared, because I think you sort of get used to the fact that Grad's coming in and the drones are dropping bombs and you've lost 3 of your mates and you go out with 8 guys, you come back in with 6 the next day. And, you know, so 7 weeks we'd lost, guys, Ivanov and Dima, and they were just dropping like flies. And anybody that wasn't 60% of the platoon was in the hospital with shrapnel. We lost all 3 BTRs for airstrikes. So we were hemorrhaging people. I was quite lucky. I come out without scratch, but most of the guys were injured, including my boss, the bear, who got shrapnel in his shoulder and still kept pushing along. So, I mean, it was winging around everywhere. So you sort of come to terms with the fact that you're going to die. It was just another phase of it. So I don't remember being scared for sure. But being captured and electrocuted, I can't describe the pain. It's just no training could train for pain. Once you've had one, you're dribbling, your arms twitching, you can't do anything about it. And they showed me the torture video afterwards, saying we're going to send this to your family and, you're dead on the internet. So I know there's a torture video out there of me somewhere, but, I still keep looking on those Russian Telegram channels thinking one day someone's going to put it on. So, but I hope they do. I certainly don't have any regrets about making that decision to surrender. And I'm here to tell the tale. I feel it's the obligation really to tell the tale, in a different way. I'm not retired now. I'm 51 this year, and I could do more damage now than I could ever do in the trench with the platform they gave me. But yeah, I don't fight in the front lines anymore, but I have to fight in a different way.